This delicious soup, I'm going to teach you the recipe. It's worth your time. Yesterday, I decided to make French bread. Now, I wasn't making French bread because I was craving French bread. I was making French bread because I was craving French onion soup. I really wanted to make French onion soup. I didn't want to go without some French onion soup. Folks, I got everything for it. It doesn't make sense not to make it. Well, I almost had everything. You know, normally you take slices of French bread and cross-cut them and toast them for making little croûtes to put on top of the French onion soup, and then you melt cheese over that, and it's all fantastic. I didn't have any French bread. So I've decided that I would just make my own, and I did. And today, it's all about French onion soup. So who invented French onion soup? Well, it's not hard to figure out. The name is in the title, folks. The French invented this fabulous soup. Now here's the thing. I didn't learn this directly from the French. I learned it directly from my mom. Mom's history? She was the daughter of an onion farmer who, when she married my father, he was in the military. It was after the Second World War, and they were stationed in France. So Mom met lots of folks over there, and she met some French families, and she learned how to make real French onion soup. And this is the exact same recipe that I'm passing on to you today. So you'll know, the recipe I normally make is done with 8 pounds of onions. Wow, that's a huge batch, right? Not really. That's a moderate batch of French onion soup. Those onions get cooked down from this to this. They're going to be less than a quarter of what they start with as. Okay, so we cook the moisture out of the onion, and we caramelize it and bring out flavors and characters and all of that before we ever begin making the soup. It's all about how we do the onion. So in this show, this is French onion soup. I'm going to show you the right way to do it. You're going to enjoy this. Let's get in the kitchen. I'll show you the ingredients, and we're going to get busy making some delicious French onion soup. Okay, I've got a basket. Whoops, hang on. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's see, I got to turn this thing on. It doesn't measure unless it's turned on. There, pounds and ounces were there. All right, now onions. I'm just going to start putting them in there until I get roughly as close to possible to about 4 pounds. 2 pounds, 15 ounces. We're getting there. 3.88. 4.05. Hey, I don't think I could get any closer if I tried. That's dead on 4 pounds, folks. There will be a little loss when I cut the ends off, you know, in the outer layers. These are fantastic ingredients. It's pretty basic stuff for a lot of people's kitchen. I almost always have everything I need to make this dish on hand, with the exception of sometimes this. And this I just made myself yesterday for this. That's as simple as it was. All right, so it's onions, any kind of onion you want to use, folks. I usually use a red onion for this, but guess what? I'm using yellows this time, and that's the more common, popular one for this dish. Some red wine, doesn't matter what kind. I prefer to use a Merlot, kind of like that fruity quality it has. Some beef broth, olive oil. You can use peanut oil if you want. You can use any oil, it's just cooking oil, okay? Paprika, thyme. Now I've got some fresh thyme here, but I don't know if I've got enough. It doesn't look like it. That was fresh from a neighbor's garden. It was a baby plant, and that was all we were able to get. So we got some butter, salt, some flour, garlic. Did I mention that Swiss cheese? And of course, lots of French bread always makes the topping perfect. Folks, this is French onion soup, and the recipe is absolutely killer. Onions, wonderful little item. They are flat delicious, and it's all in how you handle them as into how things go. Now, most of the time I'm going to tell you to leave the root end intact and cut off that end that grows upward, okay? There's a reason for that. Onions, they leak out of the ends, this end and this end. So if you cut both ends off, it's leaking at least twice as much. I have watched when you cut both ends of an onion, if you'll notice, this end leaks more than this end does. So we go with one. Now I need to remove some of the outer layers. To do that, holding the onion firmly, I take my knife and slide it up, going through just 2 layers. Try not to go through more. And then you're ready to peel off those outer layers. You can get to them quite easily now. So if you would, go ahead and just do that to all of your onions. And once you got your onions stripped and down to just a root, we'll move on. My onions are now stripped of their outer layers and the bottom. Now the nice thing about this is it gives you a flat surface. It's not going to roll around on you, and it makes it easier to handle, okay? I mentioned a moment ago that juice that comes out and how much it'll come out of both ends if you cut both ends. Here's the thing, it's releasing a sulfur compound in that juice. When that compound comes in contact with the oxygen in the air that you and I breathe, that compound releases a wonderful little gas called sulfur dioxide. Sulfur dioxide will make you cry because it burns your eyes. It affects the olfactory senses in a negative way, you could say. So watch out for that. We are going to be dicing these up, and it's a simple thing. You don't have to go overboard with cutting these onions up. Now there you can see where I accidentally cut a little too deep with my knife, and that will be a location where I run my knife down through. We're going to half these, and then we're going to quarter them. And I would like to mention, while we're talking about it, would you pay attention to how I'm holding this knife? Can you see this? I'm not doing this, and the reason I'm not doing this is because this is how people get injured, all right? Because the blade spins on you, and then the next thing you know, you got a big old cut somewhere, all right? Or worse, make sure your knives are razor sharp, because if you have to push hard, those are the times when you get in trouble. Pinch the blade, choke up on the handle. When you pinch that blade, the blade will not turn or roll on you. It remains stable at all times. Now we have halved the onion. I'm going to remove the root portion just to get rid of it. I can now quarter and slice. The cutting on this doesn't have to be pretty because these are going to be cooked down to a mush. But the idea is you want the onions to all kind of cook evenly and to cook it at a reasonable rate. And that means getting them at the right size. Okay, so about 3/8 to 1/2 inch thick. And then you're ready to go. That onion's ready for the pot. Just go through all of them the same way, remove the root, quarter, and slice. The next thing I would like to mention when it comes to cutting, we're holding the knife right. What about this hand? Should I hold it like this? Well, if I do, I might cut my fingers. That's foolish. Turn those fingers under so that that won't happen. Just like this, because that way, now my knife, you see, it won't cut my fingers, it'll cut my onion. And now, it won't go anywhere, see? So my finger is turned under, and then this knuckle right here becomes the guide to the side of the knife. It works like a charm. Always do it that way, okay? Turn them fingers under, cut, cut, cut. My hand becomes a cutting guide rather than something that is in the way that'll get injured, okay? They call that the crab technique. A lot of people do it. It's where you turn those fingers under. It kind of looks like a little crab. Always keep the thumb behind. That's what goes behind the food so that when you pull your fingers back, the food doesn't slide back, okay? It's just that simple, like this. There you go. So let me do it again. See if I can get you a better angle. All right, we're going to half, then quarter. All right, let me move that over. So, fingers turned under, cut, 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 cut. See how the thumb is always behind, bracing the food. It keeps it from moving. There we go. A little trick I learned a long time ago is to keep the edge of the knife facing away from me, because you can bump it and cut yourself. Don't do that, okay? These do not go with that. The last thing I want to teach you about knives and what we're doing with them. this is about garlic. Now first, when it comes to dehusking it, give it a little twist. You'll hear the husk break. Boom, looky there. That's all it does. All you have to do to get rid of that. So it's a simple thing. And of course, if you've seen my videos before, you've seen me do this a lot. And as you've seen, it does not take long to strip garlic. Now here's the thing, I didn't break the cloves, so there's no smell of garlic on my hands, no oil anywhere. And these, I can just do that to them beforehand, and whenever I need them, bam, they're ready to use, okay? When it comes to my garlic, I do not like to have that scab end in my food. I think it's a really kind of gross. So I like to just take my knife and remove that and get it out of my way. The other thing I need to do to this garlic for today's dish is I want to crush it. Boom. And I want to crush this one. Boom. For the moment, I'm going to put these in a glass dish because they don't need to go in the pot yet. But I figured while we have this out, I wanted to show you how we prep that. Our garlic is ready to go in the dish. It doesn't require cutting, mincing, or any of that. Now, if you don't want these bigger pieces showing up later, that's not hard. Go ahead and just cut them down a little bit, and you don't have to do much of that. Boom. That garlic is ready to use. Sometimes prepping garlic is easier than it looks. Onions are cut. Everything is prepped and laid out. And folks, I do that on purpose. I start things in order just so I can reach out and grab the next item without thinking about it. So I'm going to be using oil when I start cooking this. After these cook down, I'm going to throw in butter. After the butter melts, I'm going to throw in flour. Then, once those have cooked for about 10 minutes, with all of the onions, I'm going to put in beef broth and the wine. And so as you see, I go over and over on all of my items, and they're laid out in order. It makes my life so much easier when it comes to cooking. And this is what the French would call mise en place, or everything in its place. And it's a way of cooking that allows you to be organized and fast, and to think about this without having to worry about measuring or chopping or cutting this or that. It works best. I've got heat under this. I'm lowering my temperature to a medium high right now. And I'm going to start putting some oil in this. It may look like a lot of oil, but there's a lot of onion. And trust me, in the end, it will be not even noticed in the soup. Okay. Now. So here's the thing about onions, folks. They're sweet. They're really, really, really sweet. An onion is a little bit of fiber with a whole lot of sugar and water. That's all an onion is. And so when you cook the onion, it breaks the sugars down so they become something that your palate will taste. And it cooks off that extra moisture. And once we do that, it forms this base, this onion-like base that is mostly just, it looks like an onion mush is what it looks like. So we're going to take this beautiful stack of onions and we're going to change it to a complete and total mush. And that'll be okay. Once it's done, it'll be fantastic. And these larger ones, you won't notice that because the onions will have zero texture when the cooking is finished. Stir frequently. I cannot stress this enough. You don't want burning going on. We're not looking for deep caramelizing on what's on the bottom. We're looking to break the whole batch down, caramelize it a little, and then continue cooking until it's a mass of sugars and fiber. Our time needs to be tied together. Now, that's the nice thing about keeping cooking string in your kitchen. Always keep some of this stuff around. It never hurts to have a little. And all this is just a simple cotton twine, nothing more. There we go. Tie that once more. And the nice thing about this is I don't care if the leaves get lost in my dish, but I don't want the stems in there. I don't want the twiggy, woody part of it. So now I have it in such a way that I can fish it back out easily. The string is easy to find if it falls into the pot. And if I don't want it to, just tie it to the handle. It's very handy that way. Cool, huh? As I mentioned, Stir frequently. Do not allow this to just sit and keep cooking, okay? When it comes to breaking down these onions, it's something that is time consuming. This part of it does not happen quickly. It happens slowly, all right? So you're just gonna have to show some patience on this dish. Remember though, really good dishes sometimes require a little bit of patience. You might start seeing some caramelized buildup in the bottom of the pot. That's perfectly normal. Don't let that bother you. That is a part of what makes this soup great. It will impart very deep, rich tones to the soup. It's essentially caramelized sugar, but it is a part of the dish. So don't fear that. Just keep going at it. Right now we're up to about, I'd say 20-25 minutes worth of cooking, and we've cooked it down by about half. So we're getting there. Here we see this is getting cooked down quite a bit. I'm getting some darker brown on the bottom of the pot. So what I'm going to do when I start seeing that, I immediately reduce my temperature. Now what I'm doing is I'm stirring this once every 4 minutes. It's now to a medium heat, and it's going to keep cooking just fine like that. But as you can see, I've reduced it a lot. See this brown that I'm getting? That brown is caramelization. It's the sugars off the bottom of the pot. As I told you, that's something we want to keep. So in a little bit, if I have too much of it built up on my spoon, I'll scrape it off of the spoon with a knife and drop it down in there, because I want that. That's all flavor, 100%. This will need to still keep cooking, and it's going to be, what's going to be hard to recognize the fact that the onions are onions, okay? So we're going to cook it down to that point. Look at this. See how we're starting to get a different color and a different character to our onions. They are a whole different thing right now. So they're getting cooked down just the way I mentioned that they would. And as I told you, there was only going to be 20% of what we started with. Well, we're right now down to about the 40% mark. I would guess somewhere between 40 and 30%. So we're getting there. And the thing of it is what's happening here, we're cooking out all that water, and it's reducing down, so that all we're going to have left is just very little water, mostly sugar, a little bit of the fiber that was left over from the onion, and that is what we make French onion from. A little bit dark on the bottom, not a problem. We are getting there though. Look at this. Isn't that beautiful? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn down that heat again. So I'm going to go to a medium-low heat now. So remember, we started on a medium-high heat, getting these things to break down. So now I'm getting good caramelization from the sugars, a more broken down effect on the onions. We're starting to lose their actual shape, and we're not far off. I could, if I wanted to, I could at this point make an onion soup from this. But I have learned from my own successes and failures when it comes to French onion soup. And that is just go ahead, cook the onions down enough, and enjoy how much sweeter and rich and enjoyable that dish becomes. We're almost there. I'm just now in the final phase of cooking this. Look at that. There's barely anything there. There's not even an inch of there's not even an inch of onion left in the bottom of that pot. Look at that, guys. And we're getting caramelizing that's building up on my spoon, and I'm going to take that off here in just a moment. But I wanted you to see this and see how much it's cooked down. We are pretty much at that point. I mentioned to you that things would be almost unrecognizable, if not completely unrecognizable, This has got about another 3 to 6 minutes of cooking, and then we're moving on to putting butter in there and getting on with this soup. This has cooked almost an hour, working down the onions, and it depends on your altitude and a few other things. It may be a little longer than that for you or a little less, but you need to get it cooked down well, and don't be in a rush on that. If you try to rush it, it doesn't end up well, okay? You don't get a good product that way. You need to just take your time with this. Okay, so what I'm doing is just knocking loose those sugars that collected on my spoon. And they might have washed off later, but I just like to do it that way. Butter down in there. Now I'm going to make a little spot right in the middle and put my butter in there to melt. Isn't that nice? And it has been sitting out for a while, so it's already very soft. A little bit of a light stir. Take my flour, I'm going to sprinkle it on in. This is going to get kind of thick. It's going to get sticky. It's going to stick to the bottom of the pot. It's going to make more of that built up gunk on the bottom of the pot. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that at all. What it's going to do for us is it's going to give body to the soup, which would normally be fairly watery without it. And as I said, it would stick in the bottom, in the middle, and sure enough it did. You see how we're getting a deep browning? At this point, I can go ahead and lower that temperature from a medium low down to a low. See, each time we get that, it tells us our next step right there. Okay, and only a few more minutes of cooking this, and we're going to have it ready for our liquid. Now, in the event you're wondering, why do I keep scraping it off of the bottom if I want it? Well, I want to build more of it, so I have to get what's on the bottom off to do that, okay? Caramelization. All right, it has been just a little over 8 minutes, which is enough right now on this, and it is ready. Now, I mentioned to you before, I was going to cook all of this into an unrecognizable mass, and you can barely tell that these are onions at this point. I mean, it is really, really sad looking up in this pot. However, it's not a bad thing. Everything that's going on here is what I'm hoping will go on here, and this is all a good thing. So, let's get some liquid in here. It's that time. Beef stock. And of course, French onion soup is not right without a little red wine. I always put some in mine. Usually, I'm heavy-handed with this. If you want, that right there is a good amount. That's about a half a cup. Oh yeah. I like mine to have that color to it right there. So, I know just how much to put in. Garlic. Oh yeah, right down in there. I need some salt, not much. I'm putting in about half a teaspoon. The beef broth already has some sodium in it, so I don't have to really bump it much. I'm going to be putting in some of this paprika. If you've never heard of this before, believe it or not, I'm telling you, Mom learned this in France, and what she was told there by the folks that have been eating the same dish for generations, they said, remember this, Betty, red spice, red dish. There you go. Now, easy to pick out what is the garlic, because it is the white specks. Later on, it'll be almost indistinguishable, but if you do happen to see it and you don't want people looking at it, just pull it on out. And now our little sprig of thyme right down on there. And if you don't want your thyme falling in, you can always tie the string to the handle, okay? Boom, just like this. And it's not a problem because the lid will just conform the string down over the top of that. That's not a problem. That keeps it from going anywhere. That's pretty simple stuff, isn't it? Now, right now, I'm going to bring this up in temperature. I'm going to bring it back up to a medium-high temperature, and use that temperature to bring it to a boil. Once it does, I'm going to cover it, reduce the temperature to low again, and allow it to simmer. We're going to do about a 1 hour simmer. I will be adding some water to this during that, so it's going to get about a cup to a cup and a half of water added to it. That's it. French onion soup is on the way. So as you can see, if you were worried about there not being enough onion in this, look at all that onion. It looks really nice, and it stays up in that liquid really well. And the liquid has some body to it, so it's not a problem. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to add some hot water to this. I need about a cup to a cup and a half of hot water. I'm going to start with 1 cup. Just a little bit of water. And that's my simmer off. There we go. I'm going to say this soup has a tendency to be extremely rich flavored. So if you find that it is too rich or too full body for you, just add a little extra water. That's all you have to do, and it'll be just fine after that. But know now that this is a very rich dish. It has now come to a boil. So at this point, it's very simple. All I have to do is cover this pot and allow it to simmer. It just needs time, plenty of it, all right? At this point, you know how long it's going to take. This has been cooking now for about 30 minutes. Let me get a spoon here. I'm going to reach down into this. I want to get a little of this and find out what kind of flavors I have going on here and if I need to adjust anything. Oh my God. That is some very, very good soup. Okay, it just needs to cook a little longer. I'm going to add a little more water to it because it is very, very rich. And let it cook a little bit longer. I only need about a half cup of water added to this. Salt is a little bit on the light side. So I'm going to add just a tiny bit of salt here. There we go. Just that. The French term croûte is a designation for basically a piece of toasted bread. It can be any size. That's where the term crouton comes from, the little ones that are used in salads, okay? So I need some croûtes, and basically, let's get right down to it. I need some toast to put on top of my soup. And so what we do is we toast off some bread, and that becomes what we put on top of the soup. The quantity of everything I use today, well, folks, it's on my recipe that's on my website. However, this is half of that recipe. So it's 4 pounds of onions, about a cup of red wine, 3 cups of beef broth, as much cheese and bread as you want to cover the top of each bowl of soup that you do. It's up to you on that. I like plenty of each. We're going to need olive oil or any other kind of cooking oil to cook our onions with. We want to have plenty of that so we can saute these down into a soft mass. All right, so no specific amount, but I would say around about a quarter of a cup probably. Paprika, on that you're looking at about 2 teaspoons. The thyme, I normally use about twice that much, just a couple of sprigs. If this isn't enough, I'll add about another teaspoon of the dried thyme. Hopefully this should do it. Garlic, 2 cloves of that. As much of the cheese and bread as you want for this recipe. That's the way that works. And I used a quarter of a cup of flour for my thickener, a couple of tablespoons of butter that was added in with plenty of that oil, and then of course some salt, about a teaspoon of salt if you need that much. Remember, beef broth usually has a lot of salt in it. Oh, now let's take a look at this fantastic soup. Time to get this bowled up. It has simmered for an hour. It is absolutely delicious. Oh, wow. How do I know? Yeah, I tasted it. You know how it works. Oh, yeah. There we are. This needs to be topped and then melt off the cheese on that, and that'll be next. I took my French bread, cut it, toasted it. If it's a little dark like this, don't worry about that. It's not going to hurt a thing. It'll be fine. Drop the croûtes right in there. Now I like an even layer of crust across the top, and that's the reason I do 2 of those. If it was a big enough piece, 1 would do, as long as it covers the majority. Plenty of cheese. I can't say how important it is to get plenty of cheese on this dish, okay? Make sure you do that. That's one of those must-do things, okay? And yes, if you want to know how the restaurants get that dripped over the edge look, guess what, folks? You're seeing it right now. And it's attractive. That's the reason I'm doing this. It is distinct and it is attractive, and so it makes that bowl of soup just kind of stand out a little bit when you have those drips down the edge. And while it may sound a little bit silly, let's see, how should I say this? The curb appeal shall sell the real estate. All right? So I guess if you're a realtor, you really got that one right. Okay, so there it is. Soup is all covered, ready for the oven. I'm going to get it toasted up, and once it's all melted, my French onion soup's ready to enjoy. Oh, this I'm looking forward to. Oh, yeah, right there. Richness, beef, onion, it explodes with flavor. Folks, this soup has survived for centuries for a good reason. Once you learn how to make it the right way, you'll be hooked forever. This is something that you should not miss out on. Oh, I will forewarn you, this recipe is going to ruin you for going into restaurants. Every time you order French onion soup in a restaurant, from here on out, you're going to think, oh, yuck, it's too salty. It doesn't have the right flavor. It's the onions weren't cooked, and you're going to start noticing things about that French onion soup right off once you tasted what it really should taste like. Folks, thank you very much. This I'm going to dig in on in just a minute because it's one of my favorites. I am going to really enjoy this, so please do so the same. And if you would, take a look at my channel. That's Texas Cooking Today. There's lots and lots of videos on there. At this point, over 560 episodes, so that's a lot. And take a look. You're going to find a recipe you might want to try. And please remember, the older videos they're cringe-worthy. Okay? I won't say anything more. Please take a look at the links down below. There's a lot in the description box. There's the recipe, that you're going to find that right there. Also, the link to my website is going to be there. My link to Texas Cooking Today, to Chef Trotter's Tips, which is another channel here on YouTube. Please take a look. If you would, leave a comment, drop a like in the likes, and I do appreciate you. Folks, have a good day. Now for you. God, this is a good one.